The champagne was Dom Perignon. The venue was the Whitmore Estate, a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson Valley that cost $40,000 to rent for the evening. My sister Victoria had chosen every detail of her engagement party with surgical precision, from the string quartet playing Vivaldi to the hand-calligraphed place cards at each table. I wasn't supposed to be there. 3 weeks earlier, my mother had called to discuss the guest list situation. That was her phrase. The situation. As if my existence was a logistical problem that needed solving. Victoria's fiancé comes from a prominent family, Mom had explained. The Harringtons know everyone in Westchester. They're expecting a certain caliber of guests. And I don't meet that caliber, I said flatly. Sweetheart, you work from home. You rent a one-bedroom apartment. Victoria's been very understanding about your choices. But this is her moment. Bradley's parents will be there. His father is on the board of 3 Fortune 500 companies. I attended anyway. Dad had quietly slipped me an invitation when Mom wasn't looking, his small act of rebellion. He'd whispered, "She's still your sister." Now I stood near the back of the grand ballroom, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching my family perform their favorite roles. Victoria the golden child, Mom the proud matriarch, and me, the family embarrassment they tried to hide from high society. What none of them knew was that I'd paid for half of everything in this room. Growing up in the Chin household meant understanding your place in the hierarchy from the moment you could comprehend language. Victoria was the firstborn, the beauty, the one who got straight A's without trying. I was the afterthought, born 5 years later when my parents had already decided one perfect child was enough. Victoria got piano lessons, ballet classes, and a full ride to Cornell. I got hand-me-downs, community college, and a lot of sighs whenever I brought home a report card that was merely above average. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. The comparisons were constant and crushing. When Victoria won the state spelling bee at 12, Mom framed the certificate and hung it in the living room. When I came in third at my science fair at 14, an accomplishment I was genuinely proud of, Mom said, "That's nice, honey. Did you see your sister's new trophy case?" Victoria learned to weaponize my invisibility. She'd borrow my things without asking and claim she thought they were hers. She'd tell her friends I was adopted. "Look at her, she doesn't even look like us." She'd invite the whole family to her achievements and conveniently forget to mention mine. The worst was my high school graduation. I'd been accepted to 3 colleges with partial scholarships. Not Ivy League but respectable. The morning of the ceremony, Victoria announced she'd gotten into Wharton for her MBA. My graduation became Victoria's celebration. By the time I was 22, I'd learned to stop competing. I took a job as a data analyst at a small tech firm in Brooklyn, rented a studio apartment that my mother described as depressing, and quietly started teaching myself to code at night. While Victoria was getting her MBA at Wharton and dating men whose families owned summer homes in the Hamptons, I was eating ramen and building algorithms in my living room. The difference was nobody was watching me. Nobody expected anything. And in that invisibility I found something Victoria never had. Freedom. 3 years ago, I developed a predictive analytics tool that could identify market trends 6 months before they happened. A former colleague, now a partner at Meridian Ventures, saw my work and offered to connect me with investors. Within 18 months, I'd sold the algorithm to a hedge fund for $4.2 million. I used that money to start my own investment firm, Evergreen Capital, operating completely under the radar. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? Every holiday dinner was the same performance. Victoria would talk about her latest promotion, her new car, her vacation in Positano. Mom would beam. Dad would nod approvingly. Then someone would turn to me. "And how's your little job, Maya? Still renting that apartment? Any prospects on the horizon? You're not getting any younger." I would smile, give vague answers, and watch their pity settle over me like a familiar blanket. The truth was, by that point my net worth had quietly surpassed Victoria's by a factor of 12. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. 2 years ago, Victoria announced she was starting a beauty company. Luxe Beauty Company would revolutionize sustainable cosmetics, she declared at Thanksgiving, already practicing her pitch. She needed investors. "I've got meetings with 3 venture capital firms," she said, barely touching her turkey. "But I need a seed round first. Something to prove concept." Mom immediately offered to liquidate some investments. Dad suggested a second mortgage. I sat silently, pushing cranberries around my plate. That night I called Marcus Webb, my fund manager. I need you to set up an anonymous investment, I told him. Luxe Beauty Company. They'll be looking for seed funding. I want in for $1.8 million, but my name stays completely off the paperwork. That's a significant sum for a startup with no track record, Marcus said carefully. She's my sister. Understood. Victoria never questioned where the money came from. An anonymous angel investor believed in her vision. That was all she needed to know. Within 6 months, Luxe Beauty had a product line, a small team and a flagship store in Soho. Mom called me to share the good news, her voice dripping with pride that was never directed at me. Your sister is building an empire, she said. Maybe you could learn something from her. I thanked her for the update and hung up. For 18 months I watched from the shadows. I received quarterly reports on my investment, watched Victoria's Instagram transform into a carefully curated showcase of entrepreneurial success, and listened to my family praise her while dismissing me at every gathering. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Waiting. Documenting every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, every moment they made me feel like less than nothing. I didn't know exactly when I'd need that documentation, but I knew the moment would come. While Victoria was playing entrepreneur with my money, I was quietly building something much larger. Evergreen Capital started with the $4.2 million from my algorithm sale. By year 2, we'd grown to $28 million in assets under management. By year 3, 6 months before Victoria's engagement party, we'd crossed $85 million. My clients included 3 tech founders, a retired NFL player, and the heir to a pharmaceutical fortune who'd found me through word of mouth. The growth was organic, almost accidental. One client told another. A successful bet on a renewable energy startup earned us a 340% return, and suddenly my phone was ringing with new investment inquiries. I hired Diane full-time. We brought on 2 analysts. We moved from my living room to a modest office in Dumbo. But I still lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I still drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. I still dressed in clothes from Target when I visited my family. It wasn't that I couldn't afford better. It was that I didn't want them to know. There was a strange power in being underestimated, in watching people dismiss you while you quietly held the cards that could change everything. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every awkward family dinner, I sat there absorbing their condescension like a sponge. Victoria would show off her new jewelry. Mom would ask when I was going to get my life together. And I would smile, say nothing, and return to my quiet empire. My business partner, Diane Okonkwo, thought I was insane. You're worth more than your entire family combined, she said during one of our strategy meetings. Why do you let them treat you like that? Because the reveal matters, I said. When you show your hand too early, people adjust. They change their behavior, rewrite history, pretend they always believed in you. But if you wait until the moment is perfect, they can't pretend anything. Exactly. Diane shook her head but smiled. She'd known me since my data analyst days, had watched me transform from an invisible worker bee into a silent powerhouse. She understood strategy. You're playing chess while they think you're not even at the table, she said. That's the advantage of invisibility. Nobody guards against a threat they can't see. 3 months before the engagement party, I got a call from Victoria's business partner, Simone Hartley. She didn't know who I was, only that Evergreen Capital was their largest investor. We're preparing for our Series A, Simone explained. We'd love to invite our founding investors to Victoria's engagement party. It's going to be quite the event, and it would be wonderful for networking. I almost laughed. The irony was exquisite. I appreciate the invitation, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But I prefer to remain anonymous. My representative will continue to handle all communications. After I hung up, I sat in my modest living room and stared at the wall. My family was throwing a $40,000 party that I was essentially paying for, and they'd actively tried to exclude me from attending. The reveal was going to be spectacular. The engagement party was in full swing when Victoria decided to make her announcement. She clinked her champagne glass with a silver fork, and the string quartet stopped playing. 200 guests turned their attention to the golden couple standing beneath a crystal chandelier. Thank you all for celebrating with us, Victoria beamed, her engagement ring catching the light like a small supernova. Bradley and I are so grateful to be surrounded by our closest friends and family. I stood near the back, invisible as always, watching the performance. I also want to take this moment to share some exciting news about Lux Beauty, Victoria continued. We've just been approved for our series of funding, $10 million to take our company national. Applause erupted. Mom clutched Dad's arm, tears of pride in her eyes. Bradley kissed Victoria's cheek while his parents nodded approvingly. Then Victoria's eyes found me in the crowd. Of course, not everyone in this room has been quite as successful. Her smile turned sharp. Maya, sweetheart, come up here for a moment. The crowd parted. I had no choice but to walk forward, feeling 200 pairs of eyes evaluating my simple black dress, my lack of jewelry, my ordinary existence. This is my baby sister, Victoria announced, throwing an arm around me. She works from home doing, what is it you do again, Maya? Something with numbers. Data analysis, I said quietly. Right. Data analysis. Victoria's laugh was musical and cruel. She's still renting, still single, still figuring things out. But we love her anyway, don't we? Mom raised her glass. To Victoria, our shining star. The crowd echoed the toast. I stood frozen beside my sister, humiliation burning in my chest. Then Victoria leaned close to my ear, her champagne breath hot against my skin. You're the family embarrassment, she whispered, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Still renting while we build empires. Bradley smirked. Mom pretended not to notice. And something inside me snapped. I smiled politely. Excuse me, I said. I need to make a call. I walked to the edge of the room, pulled out my phone and texted Marcus Webb with steady fingers. Pull all funding from Lux Beauty Company. Effective immediately. Within 30 seconds, Simone Hartley's phone started ringing. I watched from across the ballroom as Simone's face drained of color. She stepped away from the celebration, pressing her phone to her ear, her free hand gripping a marble pillar for support. I couldn't hear her words, but I could read her body language. Panic, confusion, desperation. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Withdrawal initiated. They're calling our office. Want me to take it? No. Let it go to voicemail. I'll handle it personally. A second text from Marcus. They're panicking. Called 3 times in 2 minutes. I slipped my phone back into my clutch. This was the moment I'd imagined for years. Not with joy, but with a strange, hollow satisfaction. The moment when they'd finally understand that I was never the failure they thought I was. Simone was now rushing toward Victoria, interrupting a conversation with Bradley's parents. I saw her whisper urgently in Victoria's ear. Victoria's champagne glass trembled. That's impossible, Victoria said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. The funding was confirmed. We just announced it. I could see the calculations running across her face. The Series A was predicated on the seed round being secure. If the seed round investor pulled out now, everything would collapse. The other investors would get spooked. The valuation would tank. Everything she'd announced 5 minutes ago would be exposed as premature at best, fraudulent at worst. Simone pulled Victoria aside. Mom noticed the commotion and joined them, her brow furrowed with concern. Through the crowd, I could see their urgent, hushed conversation. The way Victoria kept shaking her head, the way Mom's face shifted from confusion to alarm. Then Simone pointed directly at me. All 3 of them turned to stare. Victoria's expression was pure bewilderment. She had no idea why her business partner was pointing at her invisible sister. Mom looked annoyed, as if I'd somehow caused a problem just by existing. I raised my glass to them and smiled. Miss Chin. A man in a dark suit appeared at my elbow. I'm Robert Walsh, head of security for the estate. There seems to be some confusion about your presence here tonight. I'm a guest, I said calmly. I understand. However, I've just received a call from our accounting department. It seems you're listed as the primary contact for the venue reservation. That's correct. I covered the deposit when my family's payment was delayed. Robert's eyebrows rose. The deposit was $22,000. I'm aware. He studied me with new respect. I see. Well, if there's anything you need, please let me know. Actually, I said, there might be some tension in a few moments. I'd appreciate if you stayed nearby. Robert nodded professionally. Of course, Ms. Chin. Across the room, Victoria was now on her phone, her voice rising in pitch. Mom was fanning herself with a cocktail napkin. Bradley's father was watching the scene with the cold calculation of a man who recognized a sinking ship. The reveal was about to begin. Victoria stormed toward me like a hurricane in Vera Wang. "What did you do?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Simone just told me our primary investor is pulling out. Tonight. Right now. And she said the withdrawal request came from someone named Evergreen Capital, which apparently is owned by..." She stopped. Her grip tightened. "That's not possible." "What's not possible, Victoria?" She said it's owned by Maya Chin. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "But that can't be right. You're the family embarrassment?" I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Still renting? Still figuring things out?" Mom appeared, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Maya, whatever you're doing, stop it. This is your sister's night." "Mom, do you know who funded Lux Beauty?" asked my voice calm. "Who put in the first $1.8 million that got Victoria's company off the ground?" "Some angel investor. Victoria told us." "That angel investor was me." The words hung in the air like a detonation. "That's ridiculous," Mom sputtered. "You don't have that kind of money. You work from home." "I do work from home. From my home office, where I manage an $85 million investment fund." I pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio summary. "Would you like to see the documentation?" Dad had quietly joined us, his expression unreadable. He took the phone from my hand and studied the screen. His eyes widened. This is real. Stat. It's real." Victoria grabbed the phone. The color drained from her face as she scrolled through the accounts, the investment statements, the company valuations. This can't." She looked up at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. "You funded my company. I believed in you," I said simply. "Even when you made it very clear you didn't believe in me." Simone had joined the group, clutching her tablet. "Miss Chin, please. If you withdraw now, we'll lose the Series A. The other investors will pull out. Everything we've built." "Everything I've built," I corrected quietly. "With my money. My risk." "Maya, sweetheart." Mom's voice had shifted to the tone she used when she wanted something. "This is all just a misunderstanding." Victoria didn't mean what she said. She was just excited, caught up in the moment. "Which moment, Mom?" I turned to face her fully. "When she called me the family embarrassment tonight. Or when you tried to uninvite me from this party because I'm not high caliber enough for the Harringtons. Or perhaps the last 15 years of being treated like a disappointment because I didn't measure up to your golden child." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Dad looked at the floor. Bradley's father stepped into our circle, his expression cold and analytical. "Victoria, is it true that your primary investor is your sister?" Victoria couldn't speak. She just nodded. "And she's withdrawing her funding?" "Mr. Harrington," I said, turning to him, "I'm withdrawing because I've just discovered that my investment was based on incomplete information. I was led to believe that Lux Beauty was built on innovation and hard work. What I see tonight is a company built on family money and cruelty." Mr. Harrington nodded slowly. "I see." He turned to his wife. "Eleanor, I believe we should go." "Wait," Bradley stepped forward. "Father, this is just a family dispute. It has nothing to do with Victoria's business." "It has everything to do with her character," Mr. Harrington replied. "And character determines business." He looked at Victoria with visible disappointment. "You publicly humiliated the person who made your success possible. That tells me everything I need to know about how you'd handle a marriage into our family." Bradley's mother was already moving toward the door. Bradley looked between his parents and Victoria, his face a mask of indecision. "Bradley," Victoria pleaded. "Don't leave. This is our engagement party. I can fix this. I'll apologize. Maya, please." "Bradley." Mr. Harrington's voice was final. "Now." Bradley pulled the engagement ring off Victoria's finger. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "but I can't marry someone who would treat family like this. If you do this to your own sister, what would you do to me?" He walked away without looking back. Victoria collapsed onto a nearby chair, her perfect makeup streaming down her face. Mom rushed to comfort her, shooting daggers at me. How could you? Mom demanded. How could you ruin everything? I didn't ruin anything, I said calmly. I simply stopped funding it. Victoria's choices ruined everything. You taught her that cruelty had no consequences. Tonight she learned otherwise. I picked up my purse and turned to Simone. I'll speak with my fund manager tomorrow about the terms of the withdrawal. It doesn't have to be immediate. I'm not trying to destroy the company, just my relationship with it. Simone nodded, still pale but visibly relieved. I started walking toward the exit, 200 stunned guests parting before me like the Red Sea. Why, I stopped. Dad was behind me, his voice thick. I knew, he said quietly. I didn't know the details, but I knew you were more than they gave you credit for. That's why I gave you the invitation. Then why didn't you ever defend me? He had no answer. Goodbye, Dad. I walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of Victoria's sobbing fading behind me. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By Monday morning, the business press had the story. Luxury beauty startup loses $1.8 million backing after founder's public humiliation of investor, her own sister. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Victoria, who had built her entire brand on authenticity and kindness, had been exposed as exactly the opposite. The Series A investors pulled out. All of them. Mr. Harrington had made a few phone calls, and suddenly no one in New York wanted to be associated with Luxe Beauty. The domino effect was devastating. Suppliers demanded payment upfront, the Soho landlord started eviction proceedings, and 3 key employees resigned within the first week. Social media was brutal. Someone had recorded parts of Victoria's speech at the engagement party and posted it online. The clip of her calling me the family embarrassment went viral, racking up 2 million views in 48 hours. The comments were merciless. Imagine humiliating the person who gave you $1.8 million. This is what happens when you confuse luck with talent. Plot twist of the century. That embarrassment was literally keeping her company alive. Mom called 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages evolved from demands. You need to fix this immediately, to bargaining, what do you want? I'll do anything, to desperate pleading, she's your sister, Maya. Family forgives. I deleted them all. Victoria texted once, I'm sorry. I replied, I know. But you're sorry because it cost you. Not because you hurt me. She didn't respond. What could she say? I was right. The Harrington engagement was officially off. The gossip pages reported that Bradley was already dating a charity foundation director from Boston, someone his parents actually approved of. The engagement ring reportedly sold at auction for $87,000, which Bradley donated to a women's business development fund. The irony was exquisite. Extended family members started reaching out to me for the first time in years. Aunts who had never remembered my birthday suddenly wanted to reconnect. Cousins who had laughed at me at reunions sent LinkedIn connection requests. I ignored them all. Luxe Beauty limped along for 3 more months before Simone approached me with an offer. She wanted to buy me out at 70 cents on the dollar and pivot the company without Victoria's involvement. Victoria's out? I asked. She's been voted out by the remaining board members. The brand damage was too significant. We're rebranding as Hartley Beauty and moving forward without her. I accepted the offer. It wasn't about the money, it was about closure. Victoria moved back in with our parents. Her apartment in Manhattan was too expensive without Bradley's support, and her savings had been poured into the company. At 33, she was exactly where she'd spent her whole life, pitying me for being struggling, dependent, starting over. The difference was I'd never looked down on her for it. That wasn't who I was. That wasn't who I wanted to be. 6 months later, I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It wasn't flashy, 3 bedrooms, a small garden, enough room for an office with a view of the Manhattan skyline. Diane had convinced me that I needed to stop living like I was still hiding. You won, she said during the closing. You can enjoy it now. But it never felt like winning. It felt like surviving. Like finally being seen after a lifetime of invisibility. I decorated the brownstone slowly, thoughtfully. Every piece of furniture was something I chose for myself. Not a hand-me-down from Victoria or a clearance item I'd grabbed because it was cheap. I hung art on the walls. Actual art from artists I'd discovered at Brooklyn markets. I filled the garden with lavender and rosemary, plants that smelled like the life I was finally building. Dad showed up at my new house on a Sunday afternoon unannounced. He stood on my stoop with a bottle of wine and eyes full of regret. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said. "I know. I should have defended you. For years I should have said something. I was a coward." I let him in. We sat in my living room, still mostly unfurnished, and he told me things I'd waited 30 years to hear. That he'd always seen my potential. That he'd kept my early coding projects in a box in his closet. That he'd secretly read about Evergreen Capital's success in a trade publication and cried in his car. I was proud, he said. But I was too weak to say it when it mattered. And now I'm saying it. I'm proud of you, Maya. I always was. We talked for hours. He told me about the strain in the house since the engagement party. Mom's denial, Victoria's depression, the awkward silences at dinner. He asked if there was any path to reconciliation. "Maybe," I said. "But not until they're sorry for the right reasons. Not because I have money. Not because I have power. Because they hurt me. Because they made me feel worthless for 30 years. That's what needs to be acknowledged." He nodded. "I'll tell them. Dad." "Yes. You can come back. Just you. Anytime." He hugged me, the first real hug I could remember getting from him since childhood. We weren't fully healed. We might never be. But it was a start. Victoria and I haven't spoken since the engagement party. Mom still sends passive-aggressive birthday cards with checks I don't cash. The family as I knew it is gone. But the family I chose, Diane, Marcus, the team at Evergreen, the friends who saw me when my blood relatives refused to, they're my real family now. They're the ones who celebrate my victories without resentment, who support my struggles without judgment. Last month, Forbes reached out about featuring Evergreen Capital in their annual list of top-performing boutique investment firms. The journalist asked me about my journey, about what drove me to succeed in such a competitive industry. I thought about Victoria's words at the engagement party. The family embarrassment. Still renting while we build empires. I was underestimated, I told the journalist. By everyone who should have believed in me. So I learned to believe in myself. She asked if I had any regrets. I smiled. Only that I didn't stop apologizing for who I am sooner. The brownstone is quiet now. The city hums outside my window. Somewhere across the river, my sister is picking up the pieces of a life built on appearances. And somewhere in Westchester, my mother is probably still telling people that I ruined everything. Let her. And I'm here. Finally visible. Finally valued. Finally home. Not because I proved them wrong. But because I proved myself right.